Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with veteran jazz drummer Jon Krosnick of the band Lunar Octet. He took some time to talk about an impressive new 2021 CD called Convergence and the history of a very storied band. This band is a decades-long institution in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and they are back with a potent collection of originals with a lot of influences that go from mambo, samba, funk, Afrobeat, and jazz. They initially met 36 years ago and subsequently recorded their 1994 album, then reunited in the studio 25 years later. This is a great story. Enjoy.
Well, hey, thanks for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz today. I appreciate it.
My great pleasure. I listened to some of your interviews, and sounds like you're doing great stuff, so I'm honored and delighted to be a part of it.
Thank you, man. I really dig Convergence. What a wonderful collection of music and artwork, and it's a really nice, it's just a wonderful package. So it comes out during a global pandemic. Got a very unique time going on Earth. Talk to me about the timing and having this come out during a time when probably the planet needs music more than ever.
Yeah, the planet does need music more than ever, and we feel very lucky to have gotten our recording in just before the pandemic hit, because this band is made up of guys who live in Michigan, where the band was born, but I now live in California, and Steve Hiltner now lives in New Jersey, so travel involved, and Oman Piedra, our percussionist, had to come up from Ohio, not such a big trip, but we were able to get it done in the middle of winter, and we feel lucky that we could, because then, everybody had lots of time during the pandemic to be doing the mixing and editing and working on the artwork. I'm glad you noticed the artwork, because we're proud of that too. And we're lucky to have pulled it together, and here it is being released just as the world is beginning to be reborn again, which is very exciting.
What do you ultimately want the listener to get from this experience?
Well, this group was born almost 40 years ago in Michigan, and it has evolved over time in the style of jazz. It's always been big. It's always been percussion heavy. In its early days, when the band was called the Lunar Glee Club, it actually had 2 bass players, a guitar player, no pianist, 3 percussionists, and there was a strong African influence to that early music. But over time, it's evolved, so this new record is really the voices of 2 primary composers who we're very proud to be playing the music of. Steve Hiltner, who is the alto saxophonist in the band, and Aaron Kaufman, who is the conga player in the band. And Aaron brings the Afro-Latin, Afro-Cuban feel to it, and the record starts off with a piece called Norm's Mambo that Aaron wrote for a wonderful conga player in Michigan named Norman Shobi. And there's a very powerful, as you know, starting note. It just, kind of blasts off with this powerful statement of one note at the beginning of the record. And it's different from other Afro-Cuban music and fun for this instrumentation of trumpet, alto saxophone, tenor saxophone, piano, guitar, bass, drums, conga, and percussion. And so that's one of the messages that we hope listeners take home, that this is a fresh take on Afro-Cuban jazz. But the other strong voice is Steve Hiltner. And Steve is not only a great soloist, but he's a truly amazing composer and arranger. And I think this band is just the perfect instrumentation for him, with the 3 voices up front and 2 chordal instruments, where he does use the guitar very much as a melodic voice in all the music. And, there's everything from the second tune on the record, Toot Sweet, which is a pretty kind of conventional swinging thing, to Mambosa, that is a piece that combines mambo and bossa nova, flugel tune that's kind of a funky tune, and tunes like Samba Diabolico, which are really they're orchestrations and through composed multi-part compositions, much more so than a typical tune with a melody and solos and another melody. So these are the kinds of varieties that we have on the record, and what we hope people are going to walk away with is, number one, a feeling of real energy and freshness and excitement to the music, but also smiling, saying, wow, where have these guys been for 40 years? Because this is pretty cool stuff to hear. We hope that's the reaction that we get from people as we introduce the band to the world with this recording.
So I guess, speaking of variety and flavors, you got a pretty diverse group. You guys met 36 years ago. You've reconvened after a long amount of time. Talk to me kind of about the beginnings and how you all came together and how you all finally ultimately reconvened so that you could make music again.
Well, the early days were really the brainchild of a couple of people, Dan Ledezinski in particular, who is now a very successful surgeon out west, and playing music. He makes records of his own where he plays numerous instruments on the record by himself and sounds like an entire ensemble. But it was really him and Aaron Kaufman and Dan Billich, another bass player, who had the idea of putting together this group in my garage, actually. And so we started to just literally be a garage band, and people came into rehearsal with little fragments of ideas just to sort of experiment and do something where, we didn't put on a recording and put the chart up on the music stand and say, okay, play that. That we were really trying to invent it from the ground up. And I think we got a very important message really the second year of our performing in 1985, because in Ypsilanti, Michigan, which is not very far from Detroit, is one of the major jazz radio stations in the world, WEMU, and they were running a regular jazz competition at that time. And they would have a series of bands come in and play live on the radio in a big tent with, an audience of 1,000 people. And then, the audience to some degree was voting with their applause for different bands, but there was a committee of judges who were evaluating and giving points for this and that for each of the groups. And amazingly, we won that competition. And that was, a very quick statement to say to this group, this is something pretty real, and stick with it and put energy into it and make it happen. And in the coming years, what we enjoyed was a real big hug of embrace from what is now the Detroit Jazz Festival. Back in the day, it was called the Montreux Detroit Jazz Festival. The Montreux Switzerland Jazz Festival had its kind of sister festival happening in Detroit. And pretty quickly, we were kind of selected to be a featured band at that festival for a number of years, and we were actually the first band to open the nationwide NPR live broadcast from that festival one year. So that's, it was the jazz world saying to us that we were doing something people liked. And those recordings are actually available still today. You can see some of those Montreux Detroit Jazz Festival performances on YouTube that were entirely live on television. And just, as the 30th anniversary of the band was coming up, a couple of us were talking because we really did create friendships that have lasted a lifetime. And so each of us is playing in various different kinds of musical situations. I run a band that's based in San Francisco called Charged Particles that's about to celebrate its 30th anniversary. And that group is a trio, piano, bass, and drums, but we've also been doing work with the great jazz superstar Paul McCandless, traveling around the world playing his music with him. And we have a record coming out in October on Summit Records called Live at the Baked Potato, which is a performance with saxophonist Todd Dickow, who's an amazing player. We're doing the music of Michael Brecker on that record. And so Charged Particles plays Steve Hiltner's compositions. Charged Particles plays Aaron Kaufman's compositions. And so those friendships have maintained and our musical connections have maintained. And when the 30th anniversary was coming up, we said, okay, let's maybe think about would people like to get back together. And there was absolutely no hesitation, and the 30th anniversary reunion performance was sold out with people standing all around in the backs of the performance hall. And we said, okay, this is too good not to make it real. So that's really what led to saying, okay, let's go in the studio and see what we can do.
So talk to me a little bit about influences. We're only as good as the shoulders we stand on. So what would you cite as maybe a collective for the group, some influences that really motivated you guys, not only in the beginning, but as you've gone along?
Influences are incredibly important, and I'm very quick to say that for me, as a jazz drummer, the most powerful influence for me is a guy I'm sure you know named Peter Erskine. Peter debuted, in a sense, his professional career, I think at age 19, with the Stan Kenton Orchestra, And it just so happened that I was at that performance, and it was up in Interlochen, Michigan at the National Music Camp. And I heard this guy play with this big, powerful, highly orchestrated 18-piece ensemble, and I was just electrified. I said, wow, I'd been playing percussion up to that point, but that's the kind of drumming I want to do, and that's the kind of ensemble I would love to be a part of, one that's where clearly lots of homework has been done, and the power of all the instruments coordinated together makes a really moving statement of many kinds. And whether it's, aggressive or romantic or whatever. And so Peter and I have been friends for a very long time. We continue to be friends today. And his playing evolved over the years as he worked with Maynard Ferguson's orchestra and Weather Report and Steps Ahead and lots of other bands throughout his career. And his playing and his approach to music has always been an important touch point for me. Dave Weckl, Steve Gadd, other players like that, also incredibly important. But really the touch point for me has always been Peter and my playing. And there are other guys in the band in the Lunar Octet who we can point to. Sam Clark is an example who he is very straightforward. That John McLaughlin has always been a really important inspiration for him. And Aaron Kaufman, the conga player, is a guy who has really studied Cuban percussion playing, Cuban conga playing in particular, and studies with a lot of the guys who are kind of on the front edge of that scene. But the truth of the matter is, Joe, that for most of the people in this ensemble, when you listen to them musically, you don't listen to the trumpet player and say, oh yeah, Brandon sounds just like Randy Brecker, or listening to Paul Warnhagen playing saxophone and saying, oh yeah, that's Dexter Gordon. It's nothing like that. That you can't actually hear the influences, but what you hear is unique, powerful solo and ensemble playing that you think, oh, that's part of what makes this ensemble fresh and fun. And so, remarkably, I think, everybody's done their homework and everybody's studied the traditions of the music, but there's no band where we can say, we're just like the next generation of X. There never really was anything quite that is like what we do exactly.
With that in mind, let's say you come to Kansas City to perform a live show. I want to know two things from what your perception is. How would you describe this band, maybe in the length of a tweet or two tweets? And what kind of show would you give live? What would that experience be like for a listener, for a concert goer that would see you live?
Well, tweets are pretty short. Let's see here if I can rise to this challenge. So, first of all, the summary word, I think, for listening to this band live is uplifting. That you can't just zone out. You can't stop paying attention. It's intellectually interesting. It's emotionally moving. It's exciting. It's surprising. The best example of all this is the tune Samba Diabolico, which is one of the Steve Hiltner compositions on the record. The band has actually done 4 videos of tunes, including Samba Diabolico, that hasn't been released. Those videos haven't been released yet, but they will be online. And that's just a great example of a piece that has lots of parts to it, that slows down, speeds up, gets soft, gets gentle, gets hard, it gets aggressive, and hits very intense grooves. And that's the kind of thing that audiences hear. What they hear is a bunch of guys who, first of all, they can tell worked hard at their computers before ever going to rehearsal, evolving complicated, interesting, engaging, moving material. And then secondly, that they spent a bunch of time in rehearsal perfecting it all. So it comes off as both, tight and exciting. And it's varied. That's the other element of it, that you just I can't tell you, oh yeah, this is an Afro-Cuban show, or yeah, this is a swing show, or whatever. That what we've done is to take a variety of different styles and put them together not only into single tunes sometimes, but across a show. So it's never boring. It's always interesting, and it's always uplifting. And so I think that's the way too long tweet I'll give you for what a show will be like. But the last thing I'll say is that what I think people will definitely hear is they will say, where have these guys been? Like musically, I'm not talking about myself here, but the other guys in the band. Like, how did I not hear more about these guys before? Because they're great players. That's one of the things that we're looking forward to sharing.
There's been so much that's been, just kind of a downer and negative about this last year. And I kind of want to end this on a more positive note. How do you believe the world of not only music, but this world is going to emerge stronger from what we've gone through with this? It's almost like, I remember when this all began, I was talking to a musician. He was kind of like, this is almost like we all got cancer. We got diagnosed. We went through it. We're going to go through recovery, and we're going to emerge out of this. So my question is, how do you believe, maybe you all as a band and as just kind of a music community, how do you think you're going to emerge stronger as we all kind of get back and the vaccines spread and the world starts opening up?
Well, I think you've hit on so many important points in what you just said, and I'll just resonate with you in the following ways. That first of all, I think, we all knew, those of us old enough to have lived through life for a few decades, we knew when this pandemic started, we knew it was going to be temporary. We knew that eventually it was going to end. And, we didn't quite know how devastating it was going to be. But I think, at least for me, there was always an element of, I didn't think we were on the edge of the end of the world. I thought, we've gotten through a lot of bad stuff before, and we will come through this again. And it is kind of like your cancer metaphor in the sense that 50 years ago, when people got cancer diagnoses, those were pretty much a death sentence. And now it's amazing how many people get great treatment and they come through it. And that's, we've lost so many important people, including so many important jazz people during this last year. But I do think that we have, as a jazz community, rediscovered ourselves, because this being forced to move online and being forced to find ways to do good quality live streaming performances was an important way to take advantage of something that, really wasn't happening. I mean, when we were all busy gigging before, Charged Particles, my California band, was doing 150 gigs a year. That's, a gig every other day. There's not a lot of rehearsal time left over when you have other things going on in your life. And this odd silver lining of the last year is how much time people had to practice and how much time they had to compose and how much time they had to get ready to be excited to relaunch right now. And happily, it's happening, at least in Northern California, where we are. It's amazing how the gigs are starting to pop up quickly, how festivals are actually not canceling this summer, and they're actually happening. And, we hope that, of course, we know this is going to end. We know we're going to come through it eventually. And so it's actually not that hard for me to see it as, both economically and emotionally devastating, but at the same time creating this opportunity for people to regroup and rethink. And, I think there are really painful losses, some of the great players who we lost due to COVID, but also some of the great jazz venues that we lost. And I think we haven't seen the last of that. The question is, how quickly can these places bounce back and pay the rent and fill the seats? And when limits are, only 20% of the seats can be filled, I think we may still see some more casualties. But I think one of the great symbols of the last year has been the fundraising efforts, and I'll just mention Birdland in New York City as just one example, where they said, look, we're on the verge of disaster. We need money from people to be able to pay the rent while we have nobody coming in here. And hundreds of thousands of dollars were donated, well beyond what their goal of fundraising was. That's really an important sign at a time when you think of the economy as devastated, that people said, look, jazz is important to me. I don't want to lose this institution. And, unfortunately, there haven't been those kinds of fundraising efforts for the huge festivals, and we hope that those festivals will all come back in 2022. I think, many won't come in 2021, but I can't help but resonate with the idea that we've all gone through tremendous pain and loss, and yet, as we move forward, there are a lot of things where we can, if we want to look back and find the silver linings, that they're there. And we may look back on this and say, boy, amazing that jazz emerged so beautifully after such a torturous period. I hope that's how we feel a couple years from now.
That's wonderful. What a wise, insightful answer. Jon, thank you for taking some time out for Neon Jazz. Good luck with the project. It's been great to get to know you and to catch up with what the band's all about and how you roll.
Well, you are doing so much to help this music. I really, really appreciate what you do to support it, and we're honored to be a part of what you're offering, and look forward to listening to many more of your interviews, and hopefully visit you someday in person.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview. We'll give you a bit of insight into the finest cats in Michigan, California, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. Thanks to Jon for his time, music, and cool. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.